You can escort me out, Miss Ashford, but the file I already sent to the board, that one doesn't leave with me. Sloane Ashford built Ashford Meridian from the wreckage of her father's betrayal, and she has never once let anyone get close enough to do the same. When she spots Marcus Hale, a quiet, unremarkable financial analyst who asks too many questions and explains too few of his answers, she sees a threat. What she doesn't see is that Marcus was sent by the board to find the fraud eating her company from the inside, and that the man she's about to destroy is the only person standing between her and ruin. By the time she learns the truth, she will have already signed the order that sets it all in motion, and the hardest thing she's ever done won't be running a billion-dollar company. It will be walking into an elementary school with no title, no leverage, and nothing to offer except the truth. Chapter 1. The quietest man in the room. The 34th floor of Ashford Meridian's Chicago headquarters smelled like recycled air and ambition. And on the morning of the third quarter budget review, both were in short supply. Sloane Ashford arrived at 7:42, 18 minutes before anyone else on the executive floor was expected. And she arrived the way she always did, heels first, coffee in hand, the particular kind of silence trailing behind her that made assistants straighten their spines without being asked. She was 36 years old, and she had spent the last 11 years building this company into something her father's name had never deserved to be attached to. The fact that it now bore her name instead was not something she took lightly. She took very little lightly. Her therapist, whom she had stopped seeing 2 years ago because the sessions kept circling back to the same conversation about trust, had once described her management style as controlled detonation. Sloane had considered that a compliment. She pulled up the budget files on her laptop before she took off her coat. The third quarter numbers for the Meridian Towers development, Ashford Meridian's largest active project, a mixed-use high-rise going up on the north side of the Chicago River, had come in Tuesday evening, and she had read them twice the night before. Then a third time at 5 in the morning. And something in the asset allocation column still sat wrong with her in a way she could not name precisely. Not wrong enough to flag, just wrong enough to notice. The review meeting started at 9. By 8:55, the conference room on 34 was full. Department heads, senior analysts, Derek Voss at the far end of the table with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the particular brand of relaxed confidence he wore the way other men wore expensive watches. Derek had been Ashford Meridian's CFO for 4 years. He was 44 silver at the temples, good at the kind of financial storytelling that made investors feel smart for understanding it. Sloane had hired him herself after the previous CFO had a health crisis, and the board had suggested 3 candidates she found underwhelming. Derek had been her choice. She reminded herself of this less often than she used to. The one person she did not recognize immediately was sitting 3 seats from the end on the left side of the table, not at the outer edge where junior staff sometimes hovered near the wall, but in an actual chair with an actual copy of the agenda printed out and placed flat in front of him, and a small, narrow notebook open beside it that he was writing in with a pen. Not typing, writing. Sloane clocked this before she clocked his face, which was unremarkable in the specific way that some faces are unremarkable. Mid-30s, dark hair that needed a cut by about 2 weeks. A gray blazer over a white shirt that had been ironed but not recently pressed. No tie. He was not looking at anyone in particular. He was reading the agenda. She leaned toward her assistant Claire, who had taken the seat to her immediate right. "Who's the analyst at the left end?" she said low enough that the question didn't carry. Claire glanced without turning her head. "Marcus Hale, financial analysis, mid-level. He's been here about 3 months, transferred in from the risk assessment team." "I don't remember approving that transfer." It came through HR during the quarter-end restructure. I can pull the paperwork. Do that, Sloane said, and the meeting started. For the first 40 minutes, the review went the way these reviews always went, department by department, slide by slide. Derek moving through the Meridian Tower's numbers with the ease of someone who had rehearsed the presentation and found it satisfying. The asset allocation figures appeared on the projection screen. Construction staging, costs, contractor payments broken into phases. A line item labeled Project Coordination Reserve that sat at $4.3 million for the quarter. Derek moved past it at the same pace he moved past everything else. Marcus Hale raised his hand, not aggressively, not the way junior employees sometimes raised their hands when they were trying to make an impression on someone senior, half-raised, apologetic, ready to pull it back down if the room didn't receive it well. He raised it the way someone raises their hand when they have a question and they intend to ask it regardless of whether the room wants them to. Sloane nodded at him. The Project Coordination Reserve, he said. His voice was even unhurried with the flat vowels of the Midwest that had been worn smooth by some years somewhere else. $4.3 million for the quarter. Can you walk through the breakdown of how that's allocated? He directed the question at Derek, not at Sloane, which she noted. Derek smiled, which was the smile he used when a question was in his professional opinion not worth the time it would take to answer, but which he was going to answer anyway out of collegial goodwill. It's a reserve line, Marcus. It's structured to cover coordination overhead across the contractor network. Phase-dependent, so the granular breakdown shifts week to week. I can get you the methodology documentation if you want to dig into the weeds after the meeting. I've read the methodology documentation, Marcus said. The formula in the documentation would put this quarter's reserve at closer to $2.8 million given the current phase. The 4.3 doesn't reconcile to the formula. There was a pause. Not a long one, 3 seconds, maybe 4. But in a room full of people who spent their professional lives reading pauses, 3 seconds was enough. Phase acceleration, Derek said pleasantly. We moved 2 contractor tranches forward in August. The reserve adjusted accordingly. It's all in the supplementary notes on page 18. Marcus looked down at page 18. He did not say anything else. But he wrote something in the notebook. Sloane watched him write it. She did not say anything either. She moved the meeting forward and the review continued, and afterward there was the usual dispersal of people into small conversations near the coffee station, and the particular performance of busyness that follows any meeting in which someone has asked a question that made the room briefly uncomfortable. Derek found her near the window, coffee in hand, and said quietly, "New guy's going to be a handful," with the kind of good-natured competence that was meant to close the subject. "I'll look at the supplementary notes," Sloane said. Derek's expression didn't shift. "Of course," he said. "I'll have my team put together a clean summary so it's easy to read." She went back to her office. She pulled up page 18 of the supplementary notes. The contractor acceleration Derek had referenced was there. 2 tranches moved forward August 14th. She cross-referenced it against the reserve formula in the methodology document. The numbers were close. Close enough that a person reading quickly would not notice. Close enough that a person who had not already been looking would not look. She closed both documents. She looked out at the Chicago River through the floor-to-ceiling glass and drank her coffee, which had gone cold. And she thought about the fact that Marcus Hale had read both documents before walking into that meeting, and had done the cross-reference in his head or on paper before any of them had sat down. She thought about the notebook. She did not think about it long. She had a 1:30 with the Meridian Towers project manager, a 3 o'clock call with the bank syndicate, and 4 months of rebuilding investor confidence after a difficult second quarter. She did not have time to think about junior analysts who ask inconvenient questions in budget reviews. At 5:45, Sloane was crossing the lobby on her way to the parking structure when she heard a child's voice from the direction of the security desk. Not crying, not distressed, just very clearly the voice of someone small who had been waiting for a while and had decided that waiting was no longer how she wanted to spend her time. "Can you call him again? He said 5:30 and it's almost 6. The security guard, whose name was Pete and who had been on the lobby desk for 7 years and had therefore seen most things, was on the phone with the internal directory. "I'm trying, sweetheart. He might be in a meeting." The girl was sitting on the bench near the security desk with a backpack that was slightly too large for her frame and a library book open on her lap that she had given up reading in favor of watching the elevators. She was 8, maybe 9, with her father's dark hair and a gap between her front teeth, and the particular expression of a child who has learned to wait for adults and has decided to be patient about it, but wants you to know that patience has limits. Marcus Hale came out of the elevator at 5:52. He was still in the gray blazer, but he'd rolled his sleeves up at some point in the afternoon, and he was carrying the narrow notebook in his left hand and his phone in the other. And when he saw the girl on the bench, his face did something that Sloane, who was standing near the lobby exit and had no particular reason to be watching, caught anyway. It was not an expression she had a ready category for. It was the specific relief of a person who has been holding something carefully all day and has finally put it down. "Lily," he said. "You're late," said Lily, but she was already gathering her backpack. "I know. I'm sorry." He crouched down to her level, which was not a thing that men in gray blazers did in the lobby of Ashford Meridian with any regularity. And he checked her over in the way parents check children, a quick scan, head to shoes, before he stood back up. "Did you eat the granola bar?" "I ate the granola bar and the other granola bar." "There was only one granola bar." "Then I ate it twice." She took his hand. "Can we get Thai food?" "We can get Thai food." He glanced up as they turned toward the exit, and for a second, 1 second, his eyes found Sloane's across the lobby. He did not smile. He did not look away immediately either. He just looked at her the way someone looks when they've noticed you noticing them and have decided it doesn't require a reaction. Then he looked back down at his daughter, and they went out through the revolving door into the gray October evening. Sloane stood in the lobby for a moment longer than she needed to. Then she went to her car, and she drove home, and she told herself that what she had seen was irrelevant to every professional consideration at hand. She almost believed it. Her phone rang at 9:18 that evening. She was in her kitchen, working through the Meridian Towers contractor files on her laptop with a glass of wine she had not touched, when the number came up as a contact she did not have saved. She let it ring through to voicemail. There was no voicemail. She looked at the number for a moment, then set the phone face down and went back to the files. On page 47 of the contractor documentation, buried in a footnote about change order procedures, there was a reference to a coordination reserve override provision she had not seen in the main document. She read it twice. Then she read it a third time, and the thing that had been sitting wrong in the asset allocation column all morning quietly rearranged itself into a shape she liked even less. She picked up her phone and looked at the missed call again. Then she pulled up Marcus Hale's personnel file and read it from the beginning. The next morning she arrived at 7:26, 16 minutes earlier than usual, and Marcus Hale was already at his desk on 34, writing in the notebook, with a cup of coffee from the place 2 blocks away that didn't have Ashford Meridian's logo on it. He was the only person on the floor. Sloane stood in the hallway for a moment where he couldn't see her and watched him write, and she could not have explained, if asked, why that image stayed with her through the rest of the day the way that it did. She did not speak to him that day. She had a board prep call at 10 and a site visit at 2 and a conversation with Derek at 4:30 that covered the Meridian Tower's timeline and which she steered carefully toward the subject of reserve line methodology without revealing that she had spent 45 minutes the previous night reading contractor footnotes. Derek was smooth. Derek was always smooth. He answered her questions with the right level of detail, enough to seem thorough, not so much that it invited further questions. And he touched her arm briefly when the conversation ended, the kind of touch that said, "I see you working too hard, and I find it admirable." And she stepped back a half step without making a thing of it. She thought about the touch on the elevator ride back up to 34. She thought about Marcus Hale's notebook. The two thoughts were not related. She kept them separate. On Thursday of that week, she passed the break room at 10 in the morning and heard Marcus's voice through the partially open door. She was walking past, not stopping. She did not stop at break rooms as a rule, but the particular quality of what she heard pulled her half a step slower without quite stopping her feet. He was on his phone. His voice was low, the way it had been in the budget meeting when he was asking a question and not performing the asking of it, and she caught 3 words before she was past the door and down the hall. "Tell the board." She did not stop. She did not turn around. But that evening, when Claire put the week's personnel summaries on her desk, she pulled Marcus Hale's file out of the stack and read it again, more slowly than before. It was clean in the way that all properly assembled files are clean. Start date, department assignment, salary grade. 3 months of performance notes from his team lead that said things like thorough and detail-oriented and works independently. Educational history, going back to Northwestern for the undergraduate degree and the University of Chicago for the master's in financial forensics, which she noted with the specific attention of someone who had studied the same discipline before she pivoted into management, and knows what that degree is actually for. Financial forensics, not financial analysis. She put the file down and picked up her phone and called Claire. "Pull the paperwork on Marcus Hale's transfer from risk assessment," she said. "I want the original request, the approvals, and whoever signed off on his placement." "I'll have it on your desk tomorrow morning," Claire said. "Tonight," Sloane said, and hung up. The paperwork arrived by email at 8:47. She read through it at her kitchen table. The transfer request had originated not from the risk assessment team leader as she would have expected, but from a name she recognized as belonging to the administrative office of the board of directors. It had been countersigned by Raymond Holt, the board chairman. She read that line 3 times. Then she set her laptop aside and sat for a long time looking at the window where the city lights of Chicago were doing what they always did in October, burning amber and cold against a sky that had given up on warmth 3 weeks ago and had not looked back. Raymond Holt, the board, a financial forensics degree. A man who asked questions about reserve lines and wrote everything in a notebook he carried on his person, and who had, as of Tuesday morning, been at Ashford Meridian for exactly 92 days. She thought about the override provision in the contractor footnotes. She thought about the $4.3 million that did not reconcile to the formula. She thought about Derek's hand on her arm and the way he had moved the meeting forward after the 3-second pause. She did not yet have a shape for what she was looking at, but she had the distinct and unpleasant feeling of someone who has been looking at a room they thought they knew and has just noticed for the first time that one of the walls is not quite flush. She went to bed at 11:30 and lay awake until 1. In the morning, she made a decision. She would watch Marcus Hale. She would not approach him, would not alert him that she was watching. She would simply pay attention the way she had always paid attention, and she would see what the attention showed her. She was very good at watching people. She had been doing it since she was 17 years old and sitting across a conference table from her father's lawyers, watching them dismantle everything she had grown up believing was permanent, and she had learned in that room, and in every room since, that the truth was almost always visible if you were willing to look at it directly, instead of at the comfortable version of it. She was willing. She was almost always willing. It was, in the end, the only thing she knew for certain about herself. Chapter 2. What He Shouldn't Have Seen. The trap was set on a Wednesday. Sloane did not know it was a trap. She would not know until much later, and by then the word trap would feel insufficient, too small a word for what Derek Voss had built over the course of 3 years, patiently in the spaces between the things she was paying attention to. But on that Wednesday morning in the 3rd week of October, what she saw was this: a notification from the company's internal security system flagging unauthorized access to a restricted file folder on the shared server. Time-stamped 11:47 the previous evening. The employee ID attached to the access log was Marcus Hale's. She read the notification at 6:52 in the morning, standing at her kitchen counter with her coffee still in the clothes she slept in, and the thing that had been sitting wrong for 2 weeks snapped into a shape she recognized immediately and did not want to recognize. A junior analyst placed through a board administrative office with a financial forensics degree he had not mentioned, accessing restricted files late at night. The narrative wrote itself in the language she had been fluent in since she was 17. Someone was in her house, looking at things they had no right to look at, and preparing to use what they found in a way that would cost her everything she had rebuilt. She was in the office by 7:38. She went directly to the head of internal security, a careful woman named Janet Reeves, who had been with Ashford Meridian since before Sloane took over, and who delivered bad news the way a surgeon delivers a prognosis, with precision and without cushioning. "The folder he accessed," Sloane said. "What's in it?" Janet pulled it up. Meridian Tower's financial projections, Phase 2 contractor agreements, and the internal cash flow model for the development financing. She paused. The cash flow model is marked restricted because it has the bank syndicate terms embedded in it. If that got to a competitor or a short seller. "I understand what it means," Sloane said. "There's more." Janet turned the monitor slightly. "Derek Voss's office sent me a video file this morning. He said he captured it on the hallway camera outside the server room, which has an additional camera on a secondary feed that I didn't know about. He had it installed 18 months ago, apparently, as a personal security measure." She clicked play. The footage was 41 seconds long. It showed Marcus Hale in the hallway outside the server room at 11:44. His employee badge held to the reader, the door opening. At 11:51, he came back out. The image quality was clear enough to see him put his phone in his breast pocket as he left. Sloane watched it once. Then she said, "Get me his keycard access log for the last 90 days. It came through in 40 minutes. Marcus had badged into the building outside of core hours 11 times in 3 months. Always between 10 at night and 6 in the morning. Always on nights when the security desk ran with a reduced overnight crew." She sat with that for a long time. The thing that made it worse, the thing she would think about later when worse had taken on a meaning she hadn't anticipated, was that it fit. It fit the way a key fits a lock. It was made for the board placement, the financial forensics degree, the quiet observation, the questions in the budget meeting that pushed on exactly the places a person would push if they were mapping the structure of something. She had been watching him for 2 weeks, and she had been reading it as caution, as competence, as the specific brand of restraint that belongs to someone who does their job without needing to be praised for it. She had been reading it wrong. Or she had been reading it right and drawing the wrong conclusion from what she read. She called him into her office at 2 o'clock. He came in the way he did everything, without hurry, without the specific quality of alertness that most people wore when summoned by the CEO and forced to think about which version of themselves to present. He sat down across from her desk and he put the notebook on his knee, closed. and he looked at her directly. "You accessed the restricted Meridian Towers files last night," she said. Not a question. "Yes," he said. The straightforwardness of it was almost startling. She had expected some version of surprise or the particular micro-expression of someone caught who has decided in the fraction of a second before speaking to style the admission as something more innocent. There was none of that. There was just the single word delivered in the same unhurried voice he used for everything, and his hands were still on the notebook, and he did not look away from her. "At 11:47 in the evening," she said. "Yes. You want to tell me why?" He looked at her for a moment. Something moved through his expression, not evasion, which she would have read immediately, and which would have resolved the question, but something more complicated. The look of a person holding two things at once and weighing them in real time. "Not right now," he said. She felt the particular cold that comes when a situation becomes uncomplicated in the worst possible direction. "Not right now," she repeated. "No." "Marcus." She said it the way she said names when she needed someone to understand that they were in the room with her and not somewhere they imagined themselves to be. "I have your keycard log for the last 3 months. I have security footage of you entering the server room last night. I have the access timestamp on a restricted file folder that contains our bank syndicate terms. And what I'm hearing from you is not right now." "That's correct," he said. She put her hands flat on the desk. "Help me understand what you think is going to happen here." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think you're going to give me until the end of the week to explain, or you're going to fire me." He said it without bitterness, without the self-pity that might have softened the bluntness into something easier to sit with. He said it like a man reading a weather forecast for conditions he is prepared to move through regardless. "And I think whichever one you decide, you'll have made it before this conversation ends." The accuracy of this was deeply unwelcome. "1 week," she said. "If you don't have an explanation for me by Friday at 5 o'clock that satisfies what I've just shown you, I will terminate your employment." That's not a negotiating position. That's the situation. She paused. "Are we clear?" "We're clear," he said. He stood up, picked up the notebook, and moved toward the door. At the door, he stopped, not because he hesitated, but because he checked something on his phone briefly before putting it back in his pocket. She caught the screen in the half-second it was visible, a message preview. The sender listed as RH, and below it, a fragment of text that she could not read at that distance, but which abbreviated the names of things she could not assemble into a complete picture before the screen went dark. He went out. She sat for a while looking at the door he had closed behind him, and she noticed that her hands were still flat on the desk, and that she had been pressing them down with more force than she'd intended. That evening, she told Derek what had happened. They were not together in any official sense. They had dinner occasionally. There had been 2 evenings in the last year that had not ended at the restaurant, and she had never discussed either of those evenings with anyone, including Derek. Not directly, because to discuss them would be to name them, and she was not ready to name them. Derek received the information about Marcus the way he received most information, with a grave attentiveness that conveyed appropriate concern and which occasionally flickered at the edges with something that moved too fast for her to read. "I should have flagged this sooner," Derek said. He was across the table from her at the restaurant near her apartment, the one where the tables were far enough apart that you could have a conversation. "I had a feeling something was off with him. The questions in the budget meeting, that level of preparation for a mid-level analyst 3 months in. Either he's genuinely exceptional or he came in with a specific agenda. What do you think?" "I think you should let me look into it quietly," Derek said. "I have some contacts at firms he worked with before. I can make some calls." "Don't," Sloane said. "Not yet. Let me do it through the proper HR channel." He nodded. "Of course." He refilled her water glass, which was something he did when he wanted to do something with his hands while his face was composing itself. "You doing okay?" She looked at him. "I'm fine," she said. She drove home alone and sat in her parking structure for 4 minutes before going inside, which was something she did sometimes when she needed the particular kind of privacy that comes from being in a small, enclosed space that is neither her office nor her apartment. She thought about Marcus Hale's face when she had confronted him, the absence of the things that should have been there, and the presence of something else she couldn't name. She thought about the RH on his phone screen, Raymond Holt. She thought about what it would mean if Marcus had been sent by the board without telling her. Not to spy on Ashford Meridian, not to steal the cash flow models for a competitor, but to look at something inside the company that the board had reason to be concerned about and that they had not yet shared with her. She sat with the shape of that for a long time. Then she told herself that she was catastrophizing, which was something she sometimes did at night, when she was tired and alone and the city outside was doing its indifferent amber burn, and that the simpler explanation was almost always correct. She went inside. She did not sleep until nearly 2. The next morning, Thursday, she received a second piece of information from Derek. It arrived as a forwarded email with a note at the top that said, "Found this in the flagged outbound queue from last night's security sweep. I pulled it before IT could log it formally. Thought you should see it first." Below was what appeared to be an email sent from Marcus Hale's company address at 11:58 on Wednesday night to an external address she did not recognize. The body of the email contained 2 attachments and a single line of text. Phase 2 confirmed. Sending the CF model and the Phase 2 agreements now. She read it twice. Then she forwarded it to Claire with instructions to get her IT security director on the phone within the hour. The IT director, a methodical man named Alan, who wore the same brand of running shoes every day and who communicated exclusively in specifics, confirmed that the outbound email had been logged in the security queue, that it had originated from Marcus Hale's company credentials, and that the attachments matched the files in the restricted folder. "Can you tell me where it was sent?" she asked. Alan gave her the external email domain. It was a consulting firm she did not recognize with a web presence that could have been built in an afternoon. A landing page, a generic contact form, 3 names listed under principals that returned no meaningful search results. A shell, she thought, or a cutout. She put the phone down and looked out at the river. She did not go to HR. She did not call Raymond Holt. She should have called Raymond Holt. She knew this in the part of herself that was still operating on the level of process and procedure, and the understanding that acting alone on incomplete information was exactly the kind of mistake that ended careers. But the part of herself that had been 17 in a room full of lawyers watching her life come apart was louder than the procedural part, and it was saying, "You already know. You've been watching him for 2 weeks, and you've been giving him the benefit of the doubt because of a child sitting on a bench in the lobby. And now you have the email and the server logs and the footage, and if you wait for procedure, he takes the information with him." She set a meeting with HR and legal for Friday at 3. She also sent Marcus a calendar invite for Friday at 4:30. The subject line said, "Follow-up discussion." On Thursday afternoon, she was in her office at 4:30 when the light on her desk phone blinked. Claire putting through an internal call. She picked up. "Miss Ashford, Marcus Hale is asking if he can move Friday's meeting to this afternoon. He says it's time sensitive." "Tell him Friday stands," Sloane said. A pause. "He says he understands. He asked me to let you know he's available whenever works for you, including early morning." She thought about Raymond Holt's name on the phone screen. She thought about the email with the attachments. She thought about the overlay of those 2 things and what they made, and she said, "Friday at 4:30. Tell him I'll see him then," and hung up. That evening, she stayed at the office until 8. At 6:45, walking past the bullpen on 34, she glanced through the glass wall and saw Marcus at his desk. He was not working on his computer. He was on his phone, and whatever the conversation was, he had one hand pressed flat on the desk and his head slightly down, the posture of a person choosing their words carefully. She watched him through the glass for perhaps 10 seconds, long enough for the posture to resolve itself from stress into something closer to discipline, and then she walked on because standing in hallways watching people through glass was not who she was. She told herself that on the elevator down. She was a person who acted on evidence, not on feeling. And she had the evidence, and Friday was 2 days away, and she would handle it then the way she handled everything. Directly, without sentiment, and with the clear understanding of what she owed the company she had built, and what she owed herself, and what she did not owe to anyone who had walked into her building with a hidden agenda and a notebook full of things she wasn't meant to see. She believed this, mostly, in the particular way that people believe true things they have told themselves so many times that the telling has started to precede the feeling. Outside, the Chicago wind had picked up off the lake, and it was cold in the specific way that October in Chicago is cold. Not yet winter, not quite fall, but something impatient and sure of itself. And she stood on the sidewalk for a moment before getting in her car. And she looked up at the building, with its 34 floors of lit windows and the Ashford Meridian logo in steel letters above the entrance. And she thought, I built this. Whatever is happening in there, I built this, and I will not let it be taken from me. She got in the car. She drove. Chapter 3. The Wrong Side of Trust. The background check results came back on a Friday morning, but Sloane had scheduled Marcus's meeting for Friday afternoon, which meant she sat with the results for 4 hours before she could act on them, and 4 hours was long enough for them to stop being information and start being weight. The report was thorough. Her private investigator, a firm she had used twice before for acquisition due diligence, and once 2 years ago for something she did not discuss, had gone back 15 years. What they found, or more precisely what they did not find, was the problem. Before the financial forensics degree at Chicago and the Northwestern undergraduate, both of which were legitimate, both of which checked out, there was a gap. Not a hole in the record the way gaps sometimes appeared due to clerical issues or relocation. A clean absence, the kind that required active effort to produce. No employment records that predate 22 months ago. Social Security activity starting effectively 3 years prior tied to a consulting entity that had since been dissolved. A driver's license address in Evanston that corresponded to an apartment rented under a corporate holding, LLC. She read the report in her office with the door closed and the city spread out behind her like a painting she had stopped noticing. And the cold that settled in her chest was the specific cold of someone who has been careful and has still been outrun. A constructed identity. Not fabricated, the degrees were real. The credentials were verifiable. The SSN was clean. But the architecture of the history had been deliberately simplified. The way you simplify something when you need it to withstand scrutiny at a distance, but not close examination. She called Claire. Move the 3 o'clock with HR and legal to this evening. I want both of them on the phone by 5. I'll set it up, Claire said, and then, Miss Ashford, the elevator on the B side is out for maintenance until Monday. Building management is routing everyone through the A side bank. Fine, Sloane said, and went back to the report. She was in the elevator at 12:10 on her way down to a lunch she had decided to cancel and reschedule, when the doors opened on 22 and Marcus Hale stepped in. She registered this the way she registered most things, instantly, with a slight internal adjustment, and she moved 2 inches to the left by reflex, which was the amount of space the elevator required that two people occupy without occupying the same space. And she pressed the lobby button that was already lit and looked at the doors. He pressed 28. There was a noise from the panel, a small mechanical complaint, and the car stopped between floors. The lights held. The ventilation held. Nothing alarming happened except that the car did not move. Marcus pressed the door open button. Nothing. He pressed the call button for building maintenance. A recording told them someone would be with them shortly. Sloane pulled out her phone and sent a text to Claire. In the B elevator stalled between 22 and 28. Get building services. Then she put her phone in her pocket because there was nothing else to do, and she stood in the stalled elevator with Marcus Hale, and 20 seconds passed in the particular silence of two people who have been in a professional confrontation and are now 6 feet from each other in an enclosed space. "I'm sorry," he said. She looked at him. For the inconvenience. The elevator. "You didn't cause the elevator." "No," he said. "I know." Another silence. This one lasted 30 seconds, and in the 30 seconds she was aware with a specificity she would not have chosen of the fact that he was not performing comfort or performing discomfort. He was simply in the elevator the way a person is in a place they didn't choose but have decided to be in without fuss. He leaned against the rear wall with his hands in his pockets and looked at the doors, and the notebook was in his jacket pocket. She could see the edge of it above the breast pocket seam, and he did not appear to be thinking about her at all. This was somehow more disarming than anything he could have said. "Your daughter," she said. It came out before she had decided to say it. He looked at her. "Lily. She waited in the lobby for you on a Tuesday. She does that sometimes," he said. "She takes the bus from school and waits if I'm running late. She likes the lobby. Pete lets her sit at the security desk." A pause. "He teaches her card tricks." Something shifted in the room. Not the room, the elevator. The sealed, small metal box between floors. Something in the quality of the air between them. "She lives with you?" Sloane said. "Full time," he said. "Since she was 4. She did not ask the follow-up question. She did not need to. And it was not the right time. And she was already aware that she was asking questions she had not planned to ask for reasons she had not cleared with herself. But he answered it anyway, briefly, without drama. "Her mom and I weren't. It wasn't a fit. Lily stayed with me. That was 4 years ago." "That's a long time to do it alone," Sloane said. "It is," he said, "but she's the reason I do the work, right?" He said this the way people say things when they are not speaking for effect, when the statement is too ordinary and too true for them to have considered whether it would land well. When it matters, she's why it matters. He paused again. "I know that sounds like a greeting card." "It doesn't," Sloane said. She meant it, which surprised her. They were quiet for a moment. The ventilation hummed. Somewhere above them, cables held their weight against a drop that was not going to happen, but which the body registered anyway, the way it always registers the theoretical. "Marcus," she said. His name in a different register than she usually used it. Not the CEO register, not the register of the confrontation 2 days ago. Something flatter, more direct. "The background check I ran on you," he looked at her without changing his expression, "has gaps," she said, "significant ones, before your graduate degree." He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I know." "You know," she said. "Yes. And you're not going to explain that either." He looked at her. There was something in his eyes. Not apology, not defiance. Something that she could only describe in the privacy of her own observation as the look of a person who is carrying something they cannot put down yet. and knows exactly how heavy it is. "I want to," he said. "I want to explain it. I know what it looks like." "What does it look like?" she said. "It looks like exactly what you think it looks like," he said. "I know that, and I know that you've made a decision, and I know it's the right decision from where you're standing, and I am asking you not as a defense, not as an explanation. I'm asking you to wait 2 more days." "You had until today," she said. "I know," he said. The elevator shuddered. The maintenance line clicked through a human voice finally apologizing, asking them to hold for another few minutes. Marcus pressed the call button again and confirmed they were between 22 and 28 non-emergency, and his voice in that exchange was completely steady, the voice of a man who has the presence of mind to provide useful information to building services while standing next to a person who is in the process of deciding his professional fate. She watched him do this and felt the specific frustration of someone who cannot find the seam in a thing they are trying to pull apart. "Why 2 days?" she said. He turned back to her. "Because what I'm doing here, what I've been doing, has a timeline I'm not in control of, and if I explain it to you today, the thing I came to do doesn't get done. And the thing I came to do..." He stopped. Started again. "It matters. Not to me. To the company, to you." He said the last 2 words with a plainness that was somehow more weighted than if he had said them with emphasis. "If I'm wrong, you can fire me on Monday and I'll go quietly. If I'm right, you'll understand why I couldn't tell you on Wednesday." She looked at him for a long moment in the stopped elevator and the hum of the ventilation, with the city holding still for a moment outside the walls. And she thought about trust, which was the thing her therapist had always wanted to talk about, the thing she had spent 11 years building systems to avoid requiring. Trust as a mechanism. Trust as a vulnerability. Trust as the thing her father had leveraged and sold and walked away from, and which she had promised herself in the marble lobby of a building that no longer bore her family's name, that she would never be naive enough to extend again. "Friday at 4:30, she said. "If you're not in my office with a full explanation..." "I'll be there," he said. The elevator began to move. It reached 28. The doors opened. He stepped out and then he turned back, not to say something significant, not to deliver a line. He just turned back because he had almost forgotten, and he said, "The Thai place on Wabash. Lily approved it. She has strong opinions about the noodles." He said it almost to himself, the way people make small private notes aloud, and then he was gone down the hallway and the doors closed, and Sloane went down to the lobby alone. She stood in the lobby for a moment before going to lunch. She thought about a man who made notes in a notebook he carried everywhere, and who had a daughter with strong opinions about noodles, and who had looked at her in a stopped elevator and said, "It matters to you," without any apparent awareness of how disarming that was, or any apparent effort to be disarming. She thought about the background check with the gaps. She thought about Derek's hand on her arm. She went to lunch. She canceled 2 items on the agenda and rescheduled 1, and ate alone at the corner table with her phone face down and her mind moving over the shape of things she could not yet see. At 3:15, she was back on 34 when Claire appeared at the door with an expression Sloane had learned to read as "something has changed." "Derek just sent something to your secure inbox," Claire said. "He said it's urgent. He said you'd want to see it before the 4:30. She went to her office and opened the inbox. The email from Derek contained a single attachment and a single line. "I didn't want to send this without giving you warning. I'm sorry." The attachment was an email thread. The top email was from Marcus Hale's company address, dated that morning, sent to the same external domain as before. The body of this email was longer. It referenced specific line items from the Meridian Tower's cash flow model, with annotations numbers broken out a brief paragraph analyzing the development financing structure. and at the bottom of the email, in the thread below, was a reply from the external address. Short, 2 sentences. Good work. The board meeting is scheduled for Tuesday. Make sure the withdrawal data is clean before then. She read the thread 3 times. The board meeting, Tuesday. Make sure the withdrawal data is clean. She thought about Marcus asking her for 2 more days. She thought about the elevator and the notebook, and Lily waiting on the bench with her library book. She thought about all the ways a person can be convincing without being honest, which was something she understood at a cellular level, because her father had been extraordinarily convincing, and had taught her in the most expensive possible way the price of reading the performance instead of the record. She picked up her phone and called HR. Push the consultation to Monday, she said. I'm moving the 4:30 to tomorrow morning, first thing. She hung up. She opened the drawer on the left side of her desk, the one that had a lock that held the documents she considered most sensitive, and she put Marcus Hale's background check report inside it and turned the key. Then she sat down and she looked at her hands on the desk, and she made the decision. She had been making it, she realized, since Wednesday morning. Maybe since the lobby 3 weeks ago when she had watched a child tell her father he was late, and had felt the specific warmth of that scene, and had told herself it was irrelevant. Maybe since the budget meeting when a man in a gray blazer had asked a question about a number that didn't reconcile, and had written the answer, or the absence of the answer, in a small notebook with a pen. She had been making the decision for 3 weeks, and now she had made it, and she sat with the madeness of it for a long moment before she let herself feel anything about it. Then she got up and went back to work because there was still a company to run, and whatever else was true that had not changed. Chapter 4. You're fired. The file isn't. She signed the termination order at 7:48 on Saturday morning. She had come in alone. No Claire, no HR yet just herself and the building's weekend skeleton crew, and the particular quiet of 34 when the floor belonged to no one. She had the document printed and on her desk before she sat down because she had learned a long time ago that the decisions that require the most from you should be made before the day has a chance to soften you. She read it once. She signed it. She put it in the folder and called Janet in security. I need Marcus Hale met at the door when he badges in this morning and escorted to HR before he reaches his desk. Standard protocol. Personal items collected by a supervisor. Keycard and devices surrendered at HR before he leaves the building. She paused. I want it handled by 8:30 before the floor gets busy. Understood, Janet said. Sloane put the phone down and looked at the signed order in the folder and thought, this is the right thing. She thought it the way she thought things that she needed to be true. Deliberate eyes open the specific quality of certainty that comes from having looked at the available evidence and drawn the only supportable conclusion. She opened her laptop. She had 17 unread emails from the last 12 hours, which was low for a Saturday. She read 3 of them and retained nothing from any of them because a part of her brain was still in the elevator between floors 22 and 28, watching a man look at her with the expression of someone holding something heavy and making the decision to keep holding it. She closed the laptop. At 8:14, Janet texted, "He's here, taking him to HR now." At 8:17, "He's asking to see you directly." She typed, "Standard protocol only, no exceptions." At 8:22, her desk phone rang. It was Janet, which meant it was not a text situation. She picked up. "He's asking me to pass you a message," Janet said. "He says, and I'm quoting him directly here, he says, 'Tell her I understand and I'm not going to fight this, but I need 30 seconds to say something to her before I go.'" Sloane was quiet. "Miss Ashford?" "Put him on," she said. A pause. Background sounds. Then Marcus's voice, the same unhurried voice, but with something underneath it today that had not been there in the budget meeting or the elevator. Not desperation, something more like a person choosing the exactly right words in a situation where there are very few of them and none of them are enough. "You can escort me out, Ms. Ashford," he said. "But the file I already sent to the board, that one doesn't leave with me." She held the phone. "3 weeks ago," he said, "before you found the access logs, I sent a full report to Raymond Holt. 74 pages. 6 months of data. Everything I found, every override, every reserve line that doesn't reconcile, every outbound transfer that shouldn't exist. It's already with the board." A pause. "I'm telling you now because you should hear it from me, not on Tuesday in a room full of people." She said nothing. Her hand on the phone was very still. "I know what it looks like," he said. "I know what Derek showed you. Those emails didn't come from my account. The one from Wednesday night, I was on the phone with Raymond Holt's office at 11:47. They can confirm the call log. The email was sent from my credentials by someone with access to the internal mail server." He said this without bitterness, without the pointed delivery of someone making accusations. He said it like a person reading a timeline. "Derek has admin-level access. He's had it for 4 years." She looked at the folder with the signed termination order. "Marcus," she said. "You don't have to believe me right now," he said. "The report is already filed. Whatever you decide—" He stopped, started again. "Whatever you decide is your decision to make." "Let me speak to Janet," she said. There was a pause. Janet's voice. "Ms. Ashford, complete the exit protocol," Sloane said. Her voice was even. It did not waver, which was something she had spent a long time learning to make it do. "Collect his devices and his keycard. Make sure his personal items are returned to him in full." She paused. "And I want the device log every call made from his work phone in the last 3 weeks on my desk in an hour." "Yes, ma'am," Janet said. She hung up. She sat for a moment in the morning quiet of 34 with her hands flat on the desk and the signed order in the folder and the sound of Marcus's voice still in the specific part of her memory where things she couldn't process immediately went to wait. "The file I already sent to the board, that one doesn't leave with me." She pulled up her calendar. Nothing on a Saturday morning. She pulled up Raymond Holt's contact information, looked at the number for a moment, then put her phone face down on the desk. She got up. She went to the window. Chicago was doing what Chicago does on October Saturdays. Gray bright river catching what light there was. The north side construction site visible from 34 with its cranes and half-finished glass. The Meridian Tower's skeleton rising into a sky that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. She thought about the reserve line that didn't reconcile to the formula. She thought about the footnote on page 47. She thought about Derek saying, "I should have flagged this sooner," with a grave attentiveness that she had read as concern, and which was now rearranging itself into something with a different structure entirely. She thought about Marcus Hale at his desk at 7 in the morning, writing in a notebook, the only person on the floor for 90 days. Not watching her. Not watching Derek. Writing. She picked up her phone and called Raymond Holt. He answered on the second ring, which meant he was awake, and which meant, given that it was 8:30 on a Saturday morning, that he had been expecting her call. "Sloane," he said. "Raymond," she said. "Tell me about Marcus Hale." There was a brief pause, not the pause of someone caught, but the pause of someone who has been waiting for a conversation to arrive and is gathering the appropriate way to begin it. "He's a forensic auditor," Raymond said. "One of the best I've worked with in 20 years. We placed him inside Ashford Meridian in July at the board's request. We had been watching an irregularity in the Meridian Tower's financials since the first quarter. It was subtle, and we didn't want to alarm you until we had enough to be certain. Marcus came in to build the documentation we needed to take legal action. The city was very still outside the glass. You didn't tell me, she said. If we had told you, and if the irregularity turned out to originate closer to you than we hoped, we would have compromised the investigation. That was our calculation. I want to say clearly, it was not a calculation made because we didn't trust you. It was made because we needed to protect you. A pause. The irregularity, as it turns out, has nothing to do with you. It never did. Marcus's report is thorough, Sloane. The fraud is significant. Derek Voss has been diverting funds through the reserve line since 18 months before Marcus arrived. The outbound consulting payments were going to a holding entity Derek controls. She stood at the window. She thought about the email Derek had sent her. I didn't want to send this without giving you warning. And the email thread attached the annotated cash flow model. The reply from the external address. The board meeting is scheduled for Tuesday. Make sure the withdrawal data is clean. Derek sent those emails, she said. He fabricated the outbound email from Marcus's account and planted the thread, Raymond said. He had a 3-day window before Marcus's report would have reached us formally. He needed to remove Marcus from the building before Tuesday. He used you to do it. Another pause. I'm sorry, Sloane. I know how that lands. She was quiet for a very long time. The cranes on the Meridian Towers site were not moving. Nothing was moving. The city outside the glass was simply there, enormous and indifferent, and she was in the 34th floor of a building she had built with 11 years of the specific, hard work that comes from having lost everything once and refusing to let it happen again. And she had just signed the termination order for the one person in that building who had been trying to protect her. I signed his paperwork, she said. This morning. He's already... She checked the time. He's already out of the building. I know, Raymond said. He called me from the lobby. He said you'd made the right decision from where you were standing. Something shifted in her chest, not dramatically, not in a way she would have described to anyone, but shifted. We're calling an emergency board meeting for Monday, Raymond said. Derek will be placed on administrative leave pending legal review. The external forensic firm we work with will take over from here. Marcus's work is done. His work is done, she said. Yes. She thought about his daughter. She thought about Lily's backpack slightly too large for her frame, and the library book, and the card tricks with Pete at the lobby desk. In the Thai place on Wabash, Lily approved it. She has strong opinions about the noodles. And Marcus's phone was in a property bag in HR right now, surrendered as part of the exit protocol she had ordered. Where is his daughter today? She said. A pause. Raymond clearly had not expected this question. I'm not sure. She's in school on weekdays, I believe. It's Saturday, Sloane said. She hung up. She grabbed a coat from the back of her chair, and she was in the elevator before she had completed the thought that was organizing itself in her chest into something she did not have a clean name for yet, but which had the specific weight of a debt she understood completely and could not begin to pay with anything that was currently in her possession. His phone was in a property bag in HR. He didn't know where Lily was waiting. He didn't know if she was waiting. Saturday. A man who came in early and stayed late and who said, "She's the reason I do the work right," and who had looked at Sloane across a stopped elevator with the patience of someone who was willing to wait as long as it took for the truth to do what truth does when it has enough room. In the elevator going down, Sloane pressed the button for the lobby and then pressed it again, unnecessary and force of habit, and the doors closed. And she stood in the small, sealed space alone this time. And she held the shape of what she had just learned very carefully, the way you hold something fragile when you are not yet sure if it is the kind of fragile that will survive being carried. She found Janet in the HR suite on the 4th floor. The property bag phone key card the notebook was on the desk tagged and logged. Janet looked up when Sloane came in and had the professional instinct not to say anything beyond what was asked. "His phone," Sloane said. "Before you finished logging it, did he make any calls after he surrendered it?" "No, ma'am. He surrendered it at 8:18. No calls after that." "The notebook," Sloane said. She looked at it through the clear plastic of the property bag. "Is that personal property or company property?" Janet checked the log. "Personal. He confirmed it when he surrendered the company items. We noted it as personal property to be returned." Sloane reached out and picked up the bag. "I'll ensure it's returned to him," she said. Janet opened her mouth, considered, and closed it. "Of course," she said. Sloane went down to the lobby. Pete was at the security desk. He looked at her coat, the property bag, the expression she was presumably wearing, which was not an expression she had designed for external viewing. And he said, with the easy familiarity of someone who has worked a lobby desk for 7 years and has developed opinions about the people who pass through it, "You're looking for Mr. Hale. Do you know where he went?" "He asked me about the 26 bus to Lakeview," Pete said. "His daughter goes to the Saturday program at the Lakeview Community Center on Addison, ceramics class. He said he was going to walk." A pause. "He said the walk would do him good." She looked at Pete. "Thank you," she said. She went out through the revolving door into the October morning. She did not take the 26 bus. She walked 4 blocks to where she had parked her car, and she drove north on Clark because she knew the area. She had run along the lakefront path that way for 2 years, before the schedule of running a company had rearranged her mornings, and she found the Lakeview Community Center on Addison after one wrong turn on a street where the Saturday farmers market had narrowed traffic to a single lane of patient, slow-moving cars. She found a parking space half a block away. She sat in the car for a moment because she had found in the last several years that sitting in the car was the only place she could complete thoughts that resisted completion anywhere else. She thought about the termination order with her signature on it sitting in the folder on her desk on 34. She thought about Derek's hand on her arm, easy and reassuring, "I should have flagged this sooner," and the way she had read that as an ally being careful, and was now reading it as a man making sure she was looking in the right direction, while he worked in the wrong one. She thought about her father. She thought about the lawyers. She thought about what it had cost her to build something that couldn't be taken, and about the discovery that the taking does not require force. It requires only patience and the willingness to stand close enough to someone that they don't see you until you are already inside. Derek had been inside for 4 years. Marcus had been there for 90 days. She got out of the car. The Lakeview Community Center had a front desk with a volunteer and a bulletin board covered in event flyers and a hallway that smelled of air conditioning and craft supplies. The volunteer told her the ceramics program was in room 4 down the hall and to the left, and that parents generally waited in the hall or the common room, and that the class let out at 10:30. It was 10:12. She stood in the hallway outside room 4, which had a small window in the door, and she looked through it at 8 children sitting at a long table with lumps of clay in front of them, some working with focus, some working with a particular abandon that comes from being 8 years old and discovering that you can make a thing out of nothing. A woman at the front of the room was moving between students and at the far end of the table with her hair slightly more disheveled than it had been in the lobby 3 weeks ago, and her hands, orange-red with clay, up to the wrists, was Lily Hale. Lily was building something. Sloane could not tell what it was from the window, but Lily was building it with the focused, unhurried attention of someone who knew what they were making and was not in a rush to get it right faster than it was prepared to be right. Sloane stood in the hallway and watched her for a moment. Then she took out her own phone and she called Raymond Holt's assistant. Not Raymond, his assistant, who managed the board's administrative records. And she said, "I need a mobile number for Marcus Hale. His personal number, not his company device." There was a pause, a confirmation, a readback of a number she wrote on the back of a receipt from her coat pocket. She thanked the assistant and hung up. She looked at the number on the receipt. She dialed it. It rang 4 times, 5. Then a voice she did not expect, a little out of breath, as if he had been walking quickly or had just stopped walking quickly. "Hello." "It's Sloane Ashford," she said. A silence. "Your daughter is at the Lakeview Community Center," she said. "Ceramics class. She's fine. The class ends at 10:30. She paused. "I'm in the hallway outside room 4. Another silence. Longer. "I'll be there in 12 minutes, he said. She put her phone in her pocket. She went back to looking through the small window at Lily, who was still building whatever she was building, with the unhurried focus of someone who had not yet been told that time was a constraint she needed to manage. Sloane stood in the hallway and waited, and 11 minutes and 47 seconds later, Marcus Hale came through the front door of the Lakeview Community Center, slightly out of breath, and wearing the same gray blazer over a different shirt than yesterday, and carrying nothing, because everything that had been in his pockets that morning was in a property bag that Sloane had carried out of the HR suite and which was now in her coat pocket. He stopped when he saw her. She held out the bag. "I brought your notebook," she said. He looked at the bag. He looked at her. He crossed the hallway and took it from her. And for a moment they were standing close enough that she could have, if she had been someone different, reached out and touched his arm the way Derek had touched hers, easy and without consequence. She was not someone different. "She's in there," Sloane said, and nodded toward the door. "I know," he said. "I can see her through the window." She looked at the window. Lily was still building. "What is she making?" He was quiet for a moment. "A house," he said. "She's been working on it for 3 weeks. She says it's going to have a yard." Sloane looked at the small orange-red structure taking shape under Lily's careful hands, and something happened in her chest that she did not immediately try to name or manage or contain. "I spoke to Raymond Holt," she said. "I know," Marcus said. "He texted me." "You knew he would tell me eventually," she said. "Yes. You could have told me yourself. In the elevator." He was quiet for a moment. "I could have," he said. "Why didn't you?" He looked through the window at his daughter. He said, "Because if I had told you in the elevator, and if Derek found out before Tuesday, before the board meeting, he had enough admin access to destroy the transaction records before we had full copies. I needed 2 more days." He paused. "I know how that sounds. It sounds like you made a decision that cost you your job to protect something that mattered more to you than your job," she said. He looked at her. Not the elevator look. Not the look of someone holding something heavy and being patient about the weight. A different look. Clearer. "Yes," he said. "That's the most infuriating thing anyone has ever said to me in a hallway," she said. Something changed in his expression. Not quite a smile, something at the edge of one. "I'm sorry," he said. "No, you're not." "No," he said after a moment. "I'm not. I'm sorry for the part you had to." He stopped. "I'm sorry for the way it landed on you. I'm not sorry for the decision." The class bell rang from inside room 4. Through the window, the ceramics students began standing up, wiping orange hands on paper towels, lifting small clay objects with the particular care of people transporting something fragile. Lily looked up from her work and toward the door, and she saw her father through the window glass, and the expression on her face was the same one he had worn in the lobby 3 weeks ago. The specific relief of putting something down that you have been holding all day. And then Lily looked past her father and saw Sloane, and her expression shifted into something that Sloane could only read as interested. in the straightforward way that 8-year-olds are interested in things that are different from what they expected. The door opened. Children poured into the hallway. Lily came last, carrying a small clay house with a yard. Sloane could see it clearly now. 4 walls, a roof still drying, and a small mound of clay at the front that was presumably the yard. And she held it with both hands, level, the way you carry something you've made and mean to keep. "You were late," Lily told her father. Then she looked at Sloane. "Hi." "Hi," Sloane said. "You're from Dad's work," Lily said. It was not a question. "You have the same kind of coat as the lady on TV, the news one." "Lily," Marcus said quietly. "I'm not being rude," Lily said. "I'm making an observation. Dad says there's a difference." She looked at Sloane. "What's your name?" "Sloane," Sloane said. Lily considered this. "That's a good name," she said, with the authority of someone who has given the matter appropriate attention. She held out the clay house carefully. "Do you want to see I've been working on it for a long time? Dad says I take too long, but I told him that's because I'm doing it right." Sloane looked at the clay house in Lily's careful hands. She looked at the yard, the small mound at the front with a depression in it that Lily had pressed with her thumb deliberately in the shape of something that might be a garden. "You're doing it right," Sloane said. Lily considered her for another moment. Then she looked at her father. "She can come to Thai food," she said. "If she wants. I'll let her try the noodles." Marcus was quiet for exactly long enough that Sloane knew he was choosing a response with the same care he brought to everything else. "That's up to her," he said. Sloane looked at him. He looked at her. "The board meets Monday," she said. "I know," he said. "There are things that have to happen Monday that have nothing to do with Thai food." "I know," he said. "And after Monday," she said, "I would like to have a conversation with you that begins with me apologizing, which I am not very good at, and which will probably take longer than it should." "I'm not in a rush," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. In the hallway of the Lakeview Community Center, with children moving around them on both sides, and Lily holding her clay house with the patience of someone who has decided that adults take a long time to say simple things, and the October light coming through the front windows of the building in the particular way October light comes through windows in Chicago, amber, unhurried, already thinking about winter. Sloane Ashford made a decision that was not about the company or the board or the termination order sitting in a folder on the 34th floor. It was a smaller decision than any of those, and it was in the way that small decisions sometimes are the one that mattered. "I'll try the noodles," she said. Lily's face lit up. "Good," she said. "I'll tell them extra peanut sauce. You look like an extra peanut sauce person." Marcus looked at the ceiling briefly in the manner of a parent who has decided that some battles are not worth choosing. "Let's go," Sloane said, and held the door. They walked to the Thai place on Addison, 3 blocks, Lily between them holding the clay house in both hands and narrating the route in the specific way that children narrate things when they know it well and want you to know they know it. "This is the corner where the pigeons are. They're always here. Dad gives them the end of the bread, which I told him is bad for them, but he keeps doing it." And Marcus walked with his hands in his jacket pockets and said nothing to Sloane directly, but was there alongside her in the particular way of a person who has stopped needing to perform what they're feeling. She noticed this. She cataloged it the way she cataloged things without judgment, without conclusion, just the noting of a fact. He was easy to walk next to. That was the fact. She could not remember the last person she had found easy to walk next to. At the restaurant, Lily chose the booth by the window and placed the clay house carefully in the center of the table where it sat with the authority of a centerpiece. The waiter looked at it. Lily said, "It's still drying." The waiter said, "Understood," and brought menus. "She's going to eat the pad thai and then claim she can't finish it and then finish it," Marcus said, looking at the menu without looking at Lily, who was studying the laminated photographs of dishes with the focus she brought to ceramics. "I heard that," Lily said. "I know. I might get the dumplings." "You always say that." "One day I'll mean it." Sloane looked at the two of them across the table. There was something in the ordinary exchange of it, the specific texture of a small family that had learned how to be itself, that she recognized as something she had been a long time without and had stopped noticing she was without. Not wistfully, not painfully, just she recognized it the way you recognize a landscape you haven't seen in years, and which on seeing it again you understand you have always carried in some form. She ordered the peanut noodles because Lily told her to. The extra peanut sauce arrived in the small dish. "She was right," Sloane said after the first bite. "She's often right," Marcus said. "She finds this insufferable to be modest about." "Dad," Lily said without looking up from the pad thai she had ordered and was currently working through with focused attention. "Yes?" "You should tell her about the report," Lily said. "The real one. Not the—" She made a gesture that apparently stood in for something specific in their private vocabulary. "The real one." Marcus looked at Sloane. Something apologetic moved through his expression. "She knows I was doing a job here," he said. "Not the details, but she knew it was not a regular situation." "You told her?" "Not much, but she—" He paused. "She noticed things. She's perceptive." "He was sad sometimes," Lily said, factually, still eating. "In a specific way, like when something is almost done but isn't done yet. I know what that looks like." She looked up at Sloane. "Are you going to fix it? The thing at his work?" "I'm going to try," Sloane said. Lily evaluated this. "Good," she said, and went back to the pad thai. Marcus looked at Sloane over the clay house and the peanut sauce dish and the ordinary debris of a Saturday lunch, and the look on his face was the one she had first seen in the lobby, the specific thing she had not had a category for. The look of setting something down. Except that this time she had a better understanding of how long he had been carrying it, and that changed the shape of the look into something she thought she might be able to recognize on sight going forward if she saw it again. She thought she probably would. Chapter 5. What She Owed Him. The board meeting on Monday started at 8 and ran until 11:47. Which was the longest board meeting Sloane Ashford had ever sat through, and which she would later describe to no one because she did not describe difficult experiences to people as a rule, as the second hardest professional morning of her life. The hardest had been the day she turned 31, when a judge in a Cook County courtroom had finalized the bankruptcy proceedings against Ashford Industries, her father's company, which had ceased to be hers 2 years before the proceedings began, but which still bore the name she had grown up believing was permanent. And she had sat in the back row and listened to a judge say in the neutral language of the law that some things are not recoverable. This was not that. This was recoverable. She sat at the head of the table in the Ashford Meridian boardroom, and she looked at the 12 people arranged around it. Raymond Holt at the far end, 3 outside directors, the rest, a mix of the faces she had learned to read over 4 years of quarterly meetings. And she watched Derek Voss be escorted in by the board's legal counsel and then, 20 minutes later, be escorted out again. He came in the way he came into every room, easy, silver-templed, the reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He sat down without being invited to sit. He looked at Raymond Holt and said, "I assume this is about the auditor." "The forensic auditor," Raymond said. "Yes." "Marcus Hale." Derek said the name with a particular flatness. "Sloane terminated his employment Saturday." "Sloane has reinstated him," Raymond said, "effective this morning. He'll hold the position of senior forensic auditor, reporting directly to the board." Derek looked at Sloane. His expression did not collapse, she would give him that. It shifted, rearranged itself in real time into something more careful, more considered. The expression of someone who is doing rapid calculations behind a surface that is still presenting as calm. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said. "There have been several misunderstandings," Raymond said. "We'd like to walk through them." The board's forensic firm had been given access to the transaction records over the weekend. The external copies Marcus had sent with his report, backups of everything, documents that existed on servers that Derek had no access to, formed the foundation of what Raymond now laid out, item by item, in the measured language of a man who had been in boardrooms for 40 years and understood that clarity was more devastating than volume. The reserve line overrides 18 months of them, totaling $14.7 million rerouted through a series of contractor payment disbursements into a consulting entity registered in Delaware under a holding company Derek controlled through a nominee director. The fabricated emails metadata retrieved from the mail server showed they had been generated by an application running under Derek's admin credentials at 11:51 on Wednesday night, 4 minutes after Marcus had badged out of the building. The internal camera installed in the hallway outside the server room registered to a personal security account in Derek's name, with footage routing to a private cloud backup he had access to and which the company's IT team did not. Derek listened. He did not speak during the presentation. His hands were flat on the table, and Sloane watched them because she had learned in her years at this table, and in many tables before it, that hands were more honest than faces. His hands were very still. Not the stillness of composure, the stillness of a person who has understood that movement in any direction will be read and is therefore choosing not to move. When Raymond finished, Derek said, "I want legal counsel present before I respond to any of this." "Your legal counsel is in the lobby," Raymond said. "You may speak with them before we proceed." Derek stood up. The board's attorney opened the door. Derek crossed toward it and he passed Sloane, and for a half-second he looked at her not with the easy confidence of the man who had touched her arm in the hallway and filled her wine glass, and used her trust the way you use a tool, without affection for the tool but with something else. Something that she did not want to examine too closely because it contained the specific admission that she had been, in some real sense, chosen for being willing to trust the wrong person, and she did not want to sit with that in a room full of people. She held his gaze for exactly as long as she needed to. He went out. "There are some things we need to discuss with you directly," Raymond said. "Yes," she said. What followed was 45 minutes of the kind of conversation that is technically professional and personally excruciating. The board's concern about governance exposure, the question of whether Sloane had known or should have known, the question of what oversight mechanisms had failed, and how they would be rebuilt. She answered every question directly, which was the only way she knew how to answer questions, and she acknowledged the things she had not seen and the choices she had made that had made it easier not to see them. And she did not minimize any of it, which was something she had decided on the drive-in that morning she would not minimize. She had been minimizing the wrong things for 11 years. Her need for allies, her distrust of the people who were actually on her side, and she was not going to minimize this. The board did not ask for her resignation. She had prepared for the possibility that they would. They did not. What they asked for was a structural reorganization of the finance function, an independent audit committee reporting directly to the board, and the formalization of Marcus Hale's role, which Raymond had apparently already discussed with Marcus, and which Marcus had apparently already agreed to pending one condition that Raymond declined to specify in the room. "What condition?" Sloane asked. "He'd prefer to tell you himself," Raymond said. The meeting ended at 11:47. Sloane sat for a moment after the other board members had filed out, in the particular quiet of a room where a significant thing has just happened. Raymond remained. "You did well," he said. "I signed the termination order," she said. "You made the right decision from where you were standing," he said. Marcus said that. He meant it. She looked at Raymond. He has a specific way of being generous to people who don't deserve it yet. Yes, Raymond said. It's one of the things that makes him effective. It also cost him his marriage. He paused in the way of someone who has shared something they were not certain they intended to share. His wife found it the inability to explain himself, the constant holding of information at a distance, even at home. He's working on it. A careful pause. He's been working on it. I know, Sloane said, because she did know in the way she knew things she had put together from small, separate pieces, the things he had not said in the elevator, and the things he had said, and the weight he carried in the lobby that first day, that she had read as ordinary and was now reading differently. She stood up. She put on her coat. Raymond, she said at the door. What's the condition? The one he said he'd tell me himself. Raymond looked at her with the expression of a man who has spent 40 years in boardrooms watching people learn things about themselves, and who has consequently developed a face that reveals very little. I believe it has something to do with the forensic audit team, he said, and with who leads it. She went out. She found Derek in the hallway outside the boardroom, no longer with the board's attorney, standing with his own lawyer, a tall woman in a dark suit who had the bearing of someone accustomed to arriving at situations that were already on fire, and speaking in a low, tight voice. He looked up when Sloane came through the door. Sloane, he said. His voice was still even. He was still composing himself, even now, even here. I want you to know that whatever you've been told, I've been told what the transaction records say, she said, and what the metadata says, and what the camera registration says. She stopped 3 feet from him, not because she was being strategic about distance, but because 3 feet was the correct distance for the kind of conversation that needed to be heard clearly and without theater. Don't tell me what I've been told, Derek. Tell me something I don't know. He looked at her. Something shifted in his face. The controlled surface of it, the practiced steadiness. And underneath was something she would have found easier to sit with if it were simpler. It was not simple. It was the specific expression of a person who has done something they cannot justify and who knows they cannot justify it, and who has not yet decided whether to attempt justification anyway. I was going to lose the position, he said. The board was bringing in an outside CFO. Do you know how long I've been at this company? 4 years of, I know how long you've been here, she said. And you were going to let them bring someone in over me, he said. The composure was fraying at the edges now, not dramatically, not a collapse, but the fraying that happens when a person who has been very controlled for a very long time has run out of a specific resource that was keeping the control intact. Someone who didn't build the finance function from. Derek, she said. She said it quietly. The person you hurt by doing what you did was not the board. It was not Marcus Hale. It was me. She said it without anger, which was more difficult than saying it with anger would have been. 4 years of dinners and conversations and 2 evenings that I let mean something because I thought you were someone I could, and you used that. You used exactly that to get the access you needed and to make sure I would look the wrong way. She paused. I need you to hear that. Before you go into whatever comes next, I need you to hear that you used the exact thing I've spent my life learning how not to give away, and you used it very well. He was quiet. I hope whatever comes next is worth it, she said, and she walked past him and down the hall and did not look back. And her lawyer would handle everything that came next, and the board's forensic firm would handle everything that came after that. And there would be hearings and depositions and months of legal proceedings that she would navigate the way she navigated everything, directly, with clear eyes, one day at a time, and none of that was something she needed to stand in the hallway and anticipate. She went to the elevator. She pressed 34. She rode up. Marcus was in the conference room on 34 when she found him. Not her conference room, the smaller one off the main bullpen. The one with the whiteboard that always had someone's coffee cup ring stain on it, and the chairs that were slightly too low for the table. He was sitting with a printed copy of something in front of him. His own report, she saw, or a portion of it, annotated in the handwriting she recognized from the notebook. And he had a coffee from the place 2 blocks away with the non-Meridian logo. He looked up when she came in. She sat down across from him, not at the head of the table, across from him in the chair that put them at the same level. And she looked at him without saying anything for a moment, which was something she almost never did. She was not a person who left silence unfilled as a rule. And in the silence, she let herself look at him the way she had not allowed herself to look at him for the 92 days he had been in the building, which was simply as a person without the overlay of what he represented, or what he might be doing, or what she needed him to be. He let her look. He did not fill the silence either. "The board wants to formalize your position," she said. "I know," he said. "Raymond said there's a condition." Marcus looked down at the report for a moment. He aligned the papers, a small, unnecessary gesture the kind people make when they are choosing how to begin. "I want to build the forensic audit team from scratch," he said, "properly, with a reporting structure that bypasses the CFO office, straight to the board or to a designated board committee. And I want—" He stopped. "I want the CEO to have full visibility. Real time. No more working in the dark." He looked at her. "That was my decision to work around you, not the board's. I thought it was the right call at the time. It wasn't. Or it was for the investigation. It wasn't for the other thing." "The other thing?" she said. "Trust," he said. "Which is what the investigation was about in the end. And which is what He paused again. He was not a man who paused for effect, she had learned. He paused because he was finding the right word, and he would not use the approximate one. "I should have found a way to trust you with more of it, even with the risk." She thought about the elevator. She thought about what she had said you could have told me yourself, and what he had said back, I could have. The acknowledgement without defense of the choice he had made and what it had cost. "That's not the whole condition," she said. He looked at her. Not the controlled look, not the look of a man holding something at a professional distance. A different look, one she was starting to understand, was what his face did when he had decided to let something be visible. "No," he said, "it's not." "Tell me the whole condition," she said. He was quiet for a moment, then, "I want to do this right." He said it simply, the way he said things that were simple and true and did not require decoration. "The job and whatever else this is. I want to do it right, which means slowly and honestly, without it getting complicated by the professional part before we've sorted out what the professional part actually is." He paused. "Lily already has opinions." "She offered me the noodles," Sloane said. "She offers people the noodles when she's decided they're allowed to stay," he said. Sloane looked at him for a long moment. She thought about all the ways she had learned to protect herself from the specific thing that was happening in this room right now, and about how effective those protections had been, and about what they had cost her in the currency of things she hadn't named or noticed she was missing. "Slowly," she said. "And honestly," he said. "That part's harder for me," she said. "I know," he said. "I've noticed." She looked at him. Something happened in her chest, quiet and certain, like a door opening that she had forgotten was there. "I owe you an apology," she said. "A proper one. I've been thinking about it since Saturday, and I haven't found the right—" She stopped. "I'm not good at this." "I know," he said again, and this time the not-quite smile was there at the corner of his mouth. "Take your time." "I signed your termination order," she said. at 7:48 in the morning, before the floor was busy, because I wanted it done before anyone could complicate my decision. And I was wrong. Not because the evidence was unclear from where I was standing, the evidence was unambiguous, but because I made the decision before I asked the question I should have asked first. Which question? He said. Whether the person I was trying to protect against was actually the person I trusted, she said. I didn't ask it. I haven't asked it in 11 years. I've just assumed the answer and acted on the assumption. She looked at him. I'm sorry for the exit protocol and for the lobby and not for the things I didn't ask. He was quiet for a moment. Outside the conference room, the floor was filling up, the Monday sounds of the office resuming around them. Keyboards, the elevator bell, someone's laugh carrying from the break room. I know why you didn't ask, he said. I know the history of it. Not the details, but the shape of it. A pause. It's a reasonable defense. It's a defense that almost let someone steal $14.7 million from my company, she said. Also true, he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. Between them on the table was the annotated report and the coffee with the non-Meridian logo. And outside the window, the Chicago River was doing what it did in the middle of October, in the middle of the day, moving, gray-blue, indifferent to anything on its banks. Sloane Ashford sat in a chair that was too low for the table, across from a man with a daughter who had strong opinions about noodles and a notebook full of things he had written by hand. And she thought that what she owed him was not, in the end, the apology she had just given, which was correct and necessary, and still not the real thing. The real thing was the question she had not asked in the elevator and which she was going to ask now. Why did you want to explain it to me, she said. In the elevator. You said you wanted to. Why? You could have let it play out without you had already sent the report. The investigation was done. Whatever I thought of you in the elevator didn't change the outcome. He looked at her. The window light shifted slightly, October doing its amber thing, and his face in the light had the specific quality of a person who has been careful for a long time and is deciding now to be something else. Because it mattered what you thought of me, he said, and not because of the job. A pause. That's the honest answer. She held that. Okay, she said. Okay. He said. It was not, she recognized, the end of anything. It was more like the beginning of a thing that had been beginning for 3 weeks in budget meetings and lobbies and stopped elevators and a hallway outside a ceramics class assembling itself, piece by piece without asking her permission, which was, she thought, probably the only way anything real had ever gotten past the defenses she had built to be impenetrable. She stood up. She picked up his report and handed it back to him. You'll need this, she said. We have a lot of work to do before the external auditors come in. Yes, he said. He took the report. Sloane? She looked at him. The pad thai on Wabash, he said. There's a Tuesday night they do a house special. If you... He stopped. Not a full stop, a pause of the kind where the sentence is complete. The speaker just wants to be sure it lands right. If the board meeting Tuesday goes the way I think it will, we could, if you want. She considered this. She considered him. She considered the Tuesday night house special at the Thai place on Wabash, and what it meant that the man across from her was offering it to her not as a reward or a conclusion, but as the next ordinary step in something that had not been ordinary from the beginning. Ask me Tuesday, she said, after the meeting. He nodded. After the meeting, he said. She went back to her office. 3 weeks later, on a Friday afternoon in mid-November, Lily Hale brought the clay house to show Sloane. It had been fired in the kiln and painted white walls, a green roof. A yard that was now clearly a yard, with 3 small clay flowers pressed into the clay ground. unevenly spaced in the way that real gardens are sometimes unevenly spaced. Lily carried it into Sloane's office with both hands level the way she always carried it, and she set it on the corner of Sloane's desk, which had been cleared of files for the occasion, though Lily had not specifically requested the clearing. "It's done," Lily said. "It's beautiful," Sloane said, and meant it. Lily looked at it critically for a moment, in the way she looked at things she had made when she was deciding whether they had turned out the way she intended. Then she nodded once, the nod of someone who has arrived at a fair verdict. "The yard took the longest," she said. "I kept not getting it right. Dad said I was being too careful, but I told him you can't be too careful about the yard. The yard is what makes it a home instead of just a house." She picked it up again, both hands level, and she looked at Sloane with a direct, uncomplicated attention of someone who has not yet learned that it is complicated to look directly at people. "I made it for the table," Lily said, "for when we have dinner, so there's something in the middle." She thought about it. "Is that okay?" "Yes," Sloane said. "That's okay." Lily looked satisfied. She set the house down again, and then she looked past Sloane at the window and the river below 34 floors of Chicago between them and the street. "It's really tall," she said. "Your building." "It is," Sloane said. "Do you like being up high?" Sloane thought about the window and the river and the years of looking out at it from a height. That was she had told herself about perspective, about seeing things from a distance that made them manageable. She thought about what it had cost to stay at that height, and about what had changed when she had gotten in the elevator on a Tuesday and ended up between floors at eye level with someone she had been looking down at from a distance. "I'm getting used to the ground," she said. Lily considered this. "That's good," she said. "There's more stuff on the ground." Marcus appeared at the office door, the same gray blazer, the notebook in his breast pocket, the non-Meridian coffee in his hand, which had become such a fixture that Claire had stopped commenting on it and had, as of last week, started noting his arrival in the morning so Sloane would know when he was in the building. This was Claire's own initiative, unrequested, which Sloane had noted and not remarked on. "Ready?" he said to Lily. "Almost," Lily said. She picked up the clay house, looked at it one more time, set it back down on the corner of Sloane's desk. "I'm leaving it here," she told Sloane, "for the table, for when we use it." "For when we use it," Sloane said. Lily went to the door. Marcus met Sloane's eyes over Lily's head for a moment, brief, warm, with the specific quality that she was learning to recognize as what his face did when he was simply in a moment and not managing it from the outside. Then Lily took his hand and pulled him toward the elevator because she had strong opinions about getting to the restaurant before the good booths were taken, and the office door swung closed behind them. Sloane sat at her desk. She looked at the clay house in the corner, white walls, green roof, the uneven garden in the yard. She looked at the river out the window 34 floors below, moving the way it always moved, indifferent to the particular Tuesday in November, or the signed termination orders, or the 12-minute walk to a ceramics class, or the specific thing that happens when you stop asking whether a person is a threat and start asking what they are instead. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she opened her laptop and she got back to work. Sloane spent 11 years building a fortress to protect her empire, only to realize the real threat was already holding the keys, and the only man who could save her was the one she almost ruined. Would you have trusted Marcus in that stalled elevator? Or would you have signed that termination order just like Sloane did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, share it with someone who loves a brilliant plot twist, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next cinematic journey. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode.